After losing his childhood crush, Al gave up on adventure and chose the quiet life of farming. Ironically, working the land gave him insane powers, way more than he ever wanted. Because of that, he kept getting pulled into saving the world from monsters and demons. Our story kicks off with a team of adventurers locked in battle with a terrifying forest dragon. The dragon launched a fiery blast, trying to roast them into crispy snacks. Not wanting to become barbecue, the adventurers made the smart move. They ran for their lives. Not far away, a young farmer named Al heard the thunderous boom and glanced at the sky, wondering if rain was on the way. He went back to tending his eggplants, completely calm. Al was passionate about farming, it was his whole life. Soon his fisherman buddy Tester showed up. Al casually mentioned that he had maxed out all his farming skills to level 10. Tester was shocked, especially since Al had just recently maxed out fishing too. This reminded him of something from a month earlier. Flashback to that day, Al and Tester were out fishing. Even though Al wasn't a fisherman, he ended up catching more fish than Tester. Instead of getting jealous, Tester cheered him on and felt proud to be his friend. Not long after, Al discovered he could combine his farming skills into one ability. Excited, he tried it out, and boom! His power level shot through the roof, stronger than a Super Saiyang. After that, Al decided to head for the royal capital to sell his vegetables. On the road, he heard strange noises and scanned the area. Meanwhile, the adventurer group was still running from the dragon, who hadn't given up the chase. Up in the sky, Al spotted the massive beast. Then he had a wild idea. He grabbed a carrot and hurled it at the dragon. The result? A gigantic explosion. The dragon was toast. Al stood there, stunned. His farming skill fusion had seriously boosted his attack power. With no time to waste, he got back on the road, eager to deliver his vegetables. Meanwhile, the adventurer stared at the smoke in disbelief, wondering what just happened. Later, Al arrived at the royal capital and showed his ID to the gate guard. Around the same time, the adventurers discovered tracks from a passing cart and remembered seeing a flying carrot. Then, in a nearby alley, a criminal tried to kidnap a girl. Without thinking twice, Al dashed in to help. The kidnapper pulled a short sword and lunged at him, but Al stayed cool and flipped the guy with a clean judo throw. That's when he realized his newest ability, something called perception, was pretty handy. The girl thanked him and asked for his name. But Al just gave a polite nod and rushed off. He was late delivering his veggies. Al was at the vegetable market, finishing up a delivery of his freshly harvested produce. He felt content that he'd managed to get everything there on time and was just about to head back to his village. That's when Fel, the first princess of the royal capital Noggies, suddenly appeared, apparently searching for him. Al saw the same girl he'd rescued earlier. Fel approached and asked for his name, quickly making him an unexpected proposal. She wanted him to come to the royal capital and serve the royal family. Al, caught off guard, tried to politely turn her down, insisting that he simply wanted to continue his peaceful life as a farmer. He made an attempt to leave, but fell up the offer, promising him a massive field of 33,000 square meters if he agreed. Al, confused by her persistence, asked why she was so intent on recruiting him. That's when she revealed the truth about the world status system. She explained that the bandit he had defeated had a power level over 500, equivalent to that of a knight captain. Fel then asked to see his status. Al, fully aware that he was far more powerful than even the legendary hero of old, didn't want to reveal anything. Right then, the three adventurers who had recently faced a forest dragon arrived. They reported that someone in a carriage had taken down the forest dragon in the woods. Using the opportunity, Al quickly slipped away and rushed back to his village. Fel, now more convinced than ever that Al was no ordinary farmer, made up her mind she wouldn't stop until she brought him to the capital. Just then, a knight informed Fel that she needed to return to the royal palace immediately. Upon arriving with her father, they were met with grim news. Hordes of dangerous monsters were approaching the kingdom of Magus. A knight mentioned that this could be the beginning of another disaster like the legendary Hellzone. The king was deeply shaken. He had believed peace was secured after the hero had defeated the demon King Macbeth and a treaty had been signed with the demons. But Officer Cecil voiced his concerns. He believed some demons were unhappy with the treaty and now sought revenge. Cecil went on to name Romeo Van Dead, the commander of the late Demon King's first army, as the one possibly orchestrating the monster attacks. He explained that the attempt to kidnap Princess Fel and the dragon's appearance were likely just distractions. The king was stunned, and Cecil warned that the enemy likely knew that the former hero who once defeated the Demon King was now dead. Despite Officer Cecil's urgent warning that demons were targeting the royal family, King Magus refused to abandon the capital. He couldn't bear to leave his people behind. Cecil, clearly concerned, admitted his respect for the king's resolve, but insisted he wouldn't stand by and let him die. He argued that the fall of the royal family would mean the collapse of the entire kingdom, but the king remained unmoved. Seeing this, the knight stepped in and urged the king to escape, vowing to defend the citizens with their lives. That night, Al returned to his home but accidentally smashed his door open, forgetting how much stronger he had become. He was about to take a break when his friend, Tester, came knocking. Al opened the broken door to find Tester warning him of an approaching monster horde. Time was running out, they needed to evacuate the village immediately. Al, oddly calm, mentioned checking on his vegetables first, to which Tester rolled his eyes and said he'd hide in a nearby cave. After a quick check, Al was relieved to find his vegetables unharmed. But then he heard strange noises. He ducked behind a tree to observe and spotted the monster horde heading straight for the royal capital. He hesitated, unsure if he should intervene, but quickly realized that if the capital fell, he'd have no customers for his vegetables. Meanwhile, Fel and King Magus were on the move, escorted by a squad of knights. Suddenly, Officer Cecil laughed coldly and led them into a trap. The path they followed ended in a dead end. Without warning, he turned on the knights and struck them down. Then he attacked King Magus directly, leaving everyone in shock. The king was gravely wounded, and the group struggled to fight back, but they couldn't match Cecil's power. That's when he revealed his true identity. To their horror, Fel and the king learned that Officer Cecil was actually Romeo Van Dead, a demon in disguise. One of the knights tried to stop him but was killed on the spot. Romeo sneered at the wounded king and revealed his twisted plan. He wanted Fel to become his Juliet and bear him 8 children. He attempted to take her by force, but his efforts failed. With a cruel smile, Romeo declared he would seize control of the kingdom as revenge. Then, to Fel's shock, he revealed his ability to perfectly mimic others, changing his form and voice to match her father. After transforming back, he unleashed a devastating spell on both Fel and King Magus, his intentions clear and his power overwhelming. The king barely managed to summon his guardian shield spell in time, but Romeo's power overwhelmed it. Fel rushed to aid her father, casting the same spell to reinforce their defense. But Romeo let out a sinister laugh and began chanting a powerful incantation that shattered their combined barrier. Fel stood frozen, unsure of what move to make. Romeo unleashed his Overdarkness spell, aiming to finish them off. Just as the spell was about to hit, the ground cracked and burst open. The strongest farmer in the world had arrived. Fel was stunned. It was the same guy who had once saved her from a kidnapping. Romeo demanded to know who he was. Al simply said he was a humble farmer. Romeo couldn't believe it. No ordinary farmer could dodge demon attacks like that. Al shrugged and said it was all thanks to the vegetables he ate daily, homegrown and full of nutrients. He even bragged about the eggplants he harvested that morning, rich in vitamins and fiber. Romeo flew into a rage and charged at Al with his blade. Al blocked the strike with ease and hurled Romeo into a nearby stone wall. Infuriated, Romeo absorbed the power of his subordinates and entered a terrifying new form. Now a monstrous demon, Romeo stood towering and bulked up. He looked like he never missed a chess workout. Al was impressed by the transformation, but not jealous. He knew he didn't need ridiculous muscles to win hearts. Fel, on the other hand, grew anxious. Romeo's power level had shot up. He was now level 78, with triple his original stats. Still, Al didn't flinch. He launched a brutal punch into Romeo's gut. Romeo collapsed, unconscious, while his followers fled in fear. With the enemy crushed, Al prepared to mop up the remaining demons, but they had already vanished. King Magus and Fel were safe, and relief swept through the royal court. The following day, King Magus personally thanked Al for defeating Demon General Romeo. Al replied that no thanks were needed, he did it to keep his crops safe. The king then offered Al a position to serve the royal family. Al recalled how Fel once made him a similar offer. She already guessed he'd refuse again. Still, she wanted to give him a gift, a field stretching 33,000 square meters, just for him. Fel asked Al to join the guild in return for her help. At the same time, he found out that the areas surrounding the kingdom were still dealing with monster attacks. Understanding the danger, Al agreed to her request and decided to register with the guild. Not long after, Al stood in front of his newly gifted land, 33,000 square meters of open field. However, he quickly realized it was nothing more than a stretch of rough, unused land. A few days later, Princess Fel gave Al a personal tour of the royal capital. He really enjoyed himself, especially when they reached the lively market square, where fresh vegetables were being sold. Al treated himself to 2 grilled meat skewers, garnished with the bell peppers he had previously delivered. They were delicious, and he made a mental note to grab more later. Curious, Al suddenly asked Fel if her walking around the capital with him, given her status as a princess, wouldn't cause trouble. She calmly told him it wasn't an issue. Her maid Albie was standing in as her double back at the palace. That caught Al off guard. Just then, Fel spotted a sweet shop and immediately insisted on trying the desserts. After enjoying the sweets, she took Al straight to the Adventurers Guild. Along the way, Al hesitated. He told her he didn't really want to fight monsters and would prefer to stick to farming. But Fel reminded him of their deal. He'd accepted the land, so he had to follow through. Before entering, Al worried someone might recognize Fel as royalty. She explained that her hair ornament had a magic charm that kept people from noticing her true identity. Once inside, Al was greeted by the guildmaster, who already knew about his deeds, especially how he defeated the demon Romeo Van Dead. The guildmaster then introduced him to receptionist Helen for the registration process. Helen gave Al a warm welcome, but right then, his stomach let out a loud growl. She laughed and offered him an apple pie from the cheesecake factory, which he happily accepted. When asked about why he was becoming an adventurer, Al couldn't exactly say it was part of a deal over land. So instead, he simply said he was a farmer who planned to adventure on the side. Just then, 3 familiar adventurers showed up, the same ones who had recently fought the forest dragon. They were shocked to see Al, the guy who defeated an S-rank dragon with a single hit. Other adventurers nearby also started to notice him, having already heard the stories. Not wanting any attention, Al insisted he was just a simple farmer. The three adventurers came over and introduced themselves: Jake, Luke, and Lamia. On the other hand, Helen was quietly watching and growing more impressed by Ull. She could already tell he wasn't just some average guy. Not long after, Ull headed over to accept a quest, and the guild's ranking system was explained. He found out that each quest had rank requirements. Helen had no doubt in her mind, she believed Ull could hit S rank status quickly. But Ull had zero interest in reaching S rank. If he did, he'd be way too busy to tend to his beloved vegetables. Next, Ull was shown a G rank quest that involved collecting 10 stalks of malgrass from the Forest of Grim. Helen explained that malgrass was a key ingredient in healing potions. Before Ull left on the mission, Helen gave him a robe laced with magical energy. Ull tried to say no, but Helen wouldn't hear it. She insisted he take it. The moment he put it on, Helen started blushing, realizing the robe fit him perfectly. Her feelings started to shift. Ull, of course, knew about the charm Farmer Reese had given him, but he pretended not to notice. He thanked Helen, though deep down, he realized that his peaceful farmer life might be harder to maintain than he thought. Helen was happy he accepted the robe and wished him luck. With that, Ull said goodbye to Fel and made his way toward the Forest of Grim. Just before parting, Fel told him she wanted to hang out again tomorrow. A few hours into his mission, Ull only needed one more batch of malgrass. That's when he noticed something odd on the ground, a scale. He crouched down to inspect it, wondering what kind of creature it came from. According to what he knew, only orcs were supposed to live in that forest. Suddenly, a female orc appeared behind him with one clear goal: she wanted to make a baby. Ull froze, completely terrified. Thankfully, Jake burst onto the scene just in time and drove the orc off before things got weird. Relieved beyond words, Ull thanked Jake, who asked if he was okay. Not long after, Jake's squad arrived, surprised to see Ull out here alone. Ull showed them the scale he'd found. Jake took one look and said it didn't belong to any orc, it looked like something unknown. Then he mentioned a rumor. Some believed the scale might be from a black dragon, though those were said to only live near remote high-altitude springs. Nobody had ever confirmed seeing one before. Jake then asked if Ull had finished his quest. Ull said he still needed one more stalk of malgrass. Before they could say more, the ground trembled. A heavy, dark presence filled the air. Ull looked around, stunned, wondering if a monster had arrived. That's when it appeared, a black dragon, massive and terrifying, almost like a twisted version of a legendary card beast. The creature walked past them slowly, and none of them could move. They were frozen in fear. They all sensed it. This black dragon wasn't just strong, it was something beyond comprehension. Ull activated his appraisal skill to get a closer look at the creature's stats, but what he saw left him speechless. The numbers were unreal. That same night, Helen jolted awake, heart pounding. She had dreamt of being hunted by a shadowy presence. With no memory of her early childhood, the dream offered no clear meaning, just a lingering fear she couldn't shake. The next morning, her adoptive mother noticed something was off. Helen looked pale and distant. Helen mentioned that it felt like she had blacked out. She couldn't remember coming home or anything from the previous day. Wong grew concerned, suspecting she was burned out from pushing herself too hard. Then, unexpectedly, Ull burst into the guild. He had returned with urgent news. He had encountered a terrifying creature. Jake wasted no time and broke the silence. Ull's appraisal had revealed the dragon's attack stat, 230,000. The room froze. That kind of power wasn't normal. They began to whisper the unthinkable. Could this be the malevolent dragon of legend, Ouroboros? The moment the name was spoken, Helen's legs buckled. Everyone rushed to her, but she forced a weak smile, insisting she was okay. Jake went on to explain that the dragon had passed them by without attacking, vanishing into the mist. Even so, he urged the guild to seal off the Forest of Grim immediately. Ull stepped forward and handed the guildmaster a strange object, a scale he'd found in the forest. The moment Helen saw it, something inside her cracked. Her heart pounded wildly, and memories she didn't know she had came flooding back. She saw the face of her little brother, moments before Ouroboros devoured him. Overwhelmed, Helen collapsed, unable to endure the sudden flood of trauma. Panic erupted in the guild hall as her body was gripped by a burning fever. After some time, Ull was told that Helen was resting. She was stable, but clearly shaken. That's when Ull found out Wong was more than just a guild member, she was Helen's adoptive mother. Introducing himself properly, Ull mentioned the black robe he wore had come from Helen. Wong was visibly surprised. Then Wong explained Helen's past, or what little she knew of it. 15 years ago, she'd found Helen unconscious near the Snus River. The girl had no memory of where she came from, only her name. There were no leads, no family. Still, Wong couldn't shake the feeling that Helen's amnesia was somehow tied to the dragon Ouroboros. Ull, determined to uncover the truth and stop the creature, said he wanted to investigate. But Wong quickly warned him, as a G-rank adventurer, he wasn't ready, and chasing a monster like Ouroboros would only get him killed. Ull reassured Wong not to worry about him. He simply wanted to dig through the library for anything related to the dragon Ouroboros. He also mentioned he was trying to help Helen uncover the truth behind her missing memories. Seeing his sincerity, Wong realized Ull had a good heart and handed him a few recovery potions. Before Ull began his research on the feared dragon Ouroboros, Wong asked him to report back if he discovered anything important. That afternoon, Ull received an unexpected letter from the postman, Reeks, which caught him off guard. It turned out the letter was from his mother, and he was puzzled as to how she knew he'd relocated to the royal capital. Al thanked Reeks, who wished him well before leaving. Focused on his mission, Al returned to the library to gather details about Ouroboros, determined to defeat the beast. He was stunned when he read that the dragon's attack power reached an unbelievable 230,000. To put that in perspective, he recalled that SS rank heroes were usually around 1,000, and even Romeo van Dead, the demon he had defeated, had 5,000. Al, with his own strength of 63,000, felt like a super Saiyang, but even that seemed insufficient now. It also reminded him of something one had mentioned: she found Helen 15 years ago. Driven by this lead, he asked the librarian if there were any incident reports from around the Snooze River dating back 15 years. Unfortunately, she told him those records were restricted to people of higher rank. Al tried to persuade her to make an exception, but she firmly refused. Just then, Princess Fel appeared, and Al was taken aback by her sudden arrival. She had the authority to grant access to restricted archives, so they were both escorted to a secluded section of the library, filled with books available only to high-ranking officials. Fel asked Al what he was after, and he explained he was looking for any incident reports from the Snooze River area, specifically from 15 years ago. She remembered reading about a disaster in the village of Hanul and pulled out the relevant document. Realizing Al was doing all this to help someone, Fel seemed moved. Al found out that Hanul had been completely destroyed, and dragon scales were discovered in the wreckage. The report suggested they could have belonged to Ouroboros, a dragon believed to be long dead. According to the records, Ouroboros thrived by feeding on ruin and despair. The dragon was considered immortal, but had been slain long ago in a clash with its only natural enemy, the benevolent dragon Mirage. Now that Ouroboros seemed to be returning, Al realized the grave danger humanity faced once more. That's why Al decided to head to the village to see things for himself, and Fel insisted on going with him. The next morning, they left together for the ruins of Hanul. Once they arrived, Fel guided Al through what was left of the shattered village. As they stepped deeper into the ruins, Al suddenly heard a voice calling out to him. Something inside told him to follow it. He felt drawn. Then, out of nowhere, a ghostly boy appeared, dressed in a robe identical to Al's. Fel was puzzled. Al was clearly speaking to someone, but she saw no one there. When he told her about the child, she looked around, confused. It dawned on Al that this boy was a spirit, and his name was Ray. Elsewhere, Helen stirred from sleep, gazing out the window, sensing something was off. Back in Hanul, Ray noticed the robe Al wore and seemed taken aback. Al explained it had been given to him by Helen. Ray's eyes widened in shock. He said it was once his or a special robe enchanted with defensive magic, a gift from his father. Without thinking, Al draped the robe around Fel's shoulders, but she misunderstood his gesture. Then she froze, eyes widening as she finally saw the ghost. Ray smiled faintly and said it made him happy to know his sister was still alive. Al's eyes narrowed in confusion. Did Ray just say sister? He asked if Helen was his sister. Ray nodded and revealed that Helen had been the lone survivor of Hanul's destruction. But when Ray found out Helen had no memories of her past, his face turned serious. He believed something terrible had happened, something so traumatic that she sealed her memories away to protect herself. He feared that suppressing the pain would only lead to something worse, and begged Al to help her. A flashback showed the village 15 years ago, alive and full of peace. That day, Helen had gone to find her younger brother in the woods to tell him lunch was ready. Ray had been practicing sword swings, determined to become a brave hero. He stumbled over a rock, and Helen rushed to him in worry. She told him to stop pretending to be a hero, it was too dangerous. But Ray stood firm. He wasn't playing, he was training. He wanted the strength to save lives. He assured her not to worry, but Helen, being the big sister, said she couldn't help it. She didn't want him to get hurt. Then, everything changed. A shadow darkened the skies. A monstrous dragon, Ouroboros, descended upon the village. Thick black mist choked the light as fire rained down, tearing through homes. Helen and Ray turned toward the smoke rising above the trees. Their village was under attack. They hurried back toward the village, only to be met with devastation. Their home lay in ruins. Helen's heart pounded as she worried about their parents, while Ray's eyes caught sight of a massive dragon soaring ominously above. Without hesitation, they dashed into the village, searching desperately for their family, finally taking cover behind a crumbling wall. Elsewhere, Ouroboros had set his sights on a woman and her 2 children. The boy, fiercely protective, hurled a stone at the fearsome beast. Rather than intimidated, Ouroboros snarled in anger, his terrifying roar echoing through the air, forcing the family into trembling submission. Helen wanted to step in, but Ray quickly silenced her, knowing any attempt to intervene would spell their doom. The dragon's noxious breath seeped deep into the souls of the family, draining their life force. With a cruel hunger, Ouroboros consumed their fear, growing stronger as the helpless villagers fell one by one. Ray realized saving them was impossible. It was far too perilous to fight this monster. Frustration welled up inside him. He was just a child, powerless to stop the slaughter around them. Helen pleaded to help their loved ones, but Ray's voice was firm. Against such a colossal threat, they were no match. So, they fled into the forest, putting distance between themselves and the carnage. Suddenly, Helen froze. Ray urged her to keep moving. Time was running out. She explained she could smell Ouroboros' fetid breath lingering nearby, and a paralyzing dread gripped her. At that moment, the dragon appeared, blocking their escape path. There was no chance he would let them slip away. Ray grabbed Helen tightly as Ouroboros loomed, eager to terrify them. Though the dragon could have ended them in an instant, he toyed with his prey, prolonging their torment. Helen stumbled, exhausted and faltering. Realizing her brother could survive without her, she urged him to leave her behind. Just then, the dragon landed with a thunderous crash, gleefully chasing her like a plaything. Ouroboros planned to devour Helen, to feast on the fear radiating from her soul. But Ray refused to abandon her. With all his might, he hurled a sword at the beast, managing to wound it, though the blade barely left a mark. Enraged, Ouroboros sneered down at Ray, dismissing him as insignificant. He declared that Ray's little weapon was useless and decided to make the boy his first meal. Ray shouted for Helen to run, but before she could move, the dragon's sharp teeth found their mark. Ray was gravely injured, the dark beast's jaws closing around him. Helen was overwhelmed by trauma, unable to face the reality that her little brother was dying. She cradled him gently on her lap, but Ray urged her to run, not wanting his sister to suffer the same fate. The black dragon Ouroboros only sneered down at Ray, amused by Helen's desperate plea. Taking pleasure in her fear, Ouroboros decided to spare Helen, for now. He vowed to return in 15 years to claim her soul. Ray, determined to protect his sister, vowed to stop Ouroboros and somehow defeat the monstrous dragon. In a cruel twist, Ouroboros chose not to consume Ray's soul, instead letting it linger in this world so Ray could witness the dragon's return to take Helen. With a mocking laugh, Ouroboros vanished, already eager for the feast to come. With his final breath, Ray swore to guard Helen no matter the cost, dying as a true hero. Back in the present, Ul and Fel listened in shock, absorbing the tragic story Helen had endured. Ray revealed that when Ouroboros mortally wounded him, fragments of the dragon's memory seeped into his mind. Ray explained to Ul that Ouroboros always leaves a single survivor after destroying a village, the one who spreads tales of his terror. After 15 years, the dragon returns to devour that person's soul, repeating the cycle. He also said Ouroboros feeds on fear itself, which only grows his strength. Ul wished to save Helen but knew he couldn't face Ouroboros alone. Then Ray shared a crucial insight: the black dragon's weakness lay in its dependence on the negative energy of souls. Hearing this, Ul realized the key to defeating the legendary beast might be to use the opposite force, something pure and positive. Confident that this was their chance, Ul resolved to save Helen with this knowledge. Without hesitation, he grabbed Fel and dashed toward the capital at incredible speed. 10 minutes later, they arrived at the city gates, with Fel impressed by Ul's newfound strength. Fel immediately ordered the royal army to evacuate the citizens, instructing Ul to protect Helen at all costs. Meanwhile, Long checked on Helen's room but found it empty, panic creeping in as he wondered where she might have gone. The scene shifts to Helen wandering through the forest, clutching a knife. Her movements were trance-like, as if under the spell of Ouroboros' mysterious power. Unaware of her actions, she followed the voice inside her head. Suddenly, Ouroboros appeared before her, and Helen remembered the haunting dream of her little brother from just days ago. In that moment, memories of her past flooded back, and Helen was overwhelmed with sorrow as she saw Ouroboros. She couldn't believe she had forgotten that her brother had died, and guilt weighed heavily on her heart. Suddenly, Ouroboros intensified her anguish, whispering that this tragedy was bound to repeat, and that it was all her fault. This only fueled the dark energy within Helen's soul, and Ouroboros seemed to feed off it, almost like a twisted craving. She begged the dragon to end her life, asking him to spare her friends in exchange. The dragon began absorbing the negative energy, growing even more powerful. Then, with a cold voice, Ouroboros declared he wouldn't spare a single soul, leaving Helen stunned. Meanwhile, Fel had already evacuated the citizens of the royal capital, praying that Ul could defeat the menacing black dragon. The scene returned to Helen, drowning deeper in despair, ashamed that her brother's sacrifice seemed wasted. Without warning, Ouroboros tried to kill her and used his hypnotic powers to seize control of her mind. Driven to desperation, Helen resolved to end her own life with a knife, but Ul appeared just in time, stopping her. He was relieved to have arrived before it was too late. Ouroboros immediately lunged at Ul, smashing him against a tree. But Ul, protected by a magical robe, survived the brutal blow. The dragon's fury grew. He couldn't fathom that a mere human could withstand such an attack. Helen wished desperately for Ul's survival, and Ul wasn't about to run away. Charging forward, he delivered a powerful blow with his almighty farming punch, knocking Ouroboros down. Realizing Ul was no ordinary fighter, Ouroboros' arrogance faltered. Ul scanned his enemy's stats and knew the battle was far from over. He promised Helen protection, a phrase that echoed her late brother's comforting words before his death. Helen was taken aback when Ul spoke the same words her brother once said. A wave of relief washed over her, and she clung to the hope that Ul would defeat the dragon. The fight resumed, and Ouroboros tackled Ul fiercely. Ul dodged the dragon's clawed attacks, refusing to be struck. He unleashed his almighty punch once more, landing a solid hit. But Ouroboros refused to yield, realizing Ul was stronger than expected, and powered himself up again. In a sudden move, Ouroboros swung his tail and slammed Ul into the ground. Relentless, he continued his assault, while Ul struggled to withstand the overwhelming force. Finally, Ouroboros unleashed a fiery breath, sending Ul flying through the explosion's shockwave. Helen was deeply worried about Ul, but he wasn't ready to give up yet. Determined, Ul faced Ouroboros again as the black dragon unleashed another burst of fiery breath. Al swiftly dodged the attack, while Helen stood frozen, unsure of what to do next. Not wanting to lose anyone else she cared about, Helen urged Al to flee instead of risking himself to protect her. But Al grabbed her hand firmly, assuring her she wasn't to blame for the loss of her family or the people from their village. He reminded her of the promise he made to Ray, to protect his big sister and to bring down the black dragon that had devastated their home. Helen's heart stirred as she recalled her little brother's words, and as they hurried away from Ouroboros, Al shared the dragon's hidden weakness and their only chance to defeat it. Renewed with hope, Helen finally let go of her guilt over the losses they had suffered. Slowly, Ouroboros began to weaken, losing the overwhelming power he once wielded. Al felt a surge of relief. His plan was working. The black dragon looked stunned, but Al was resolute, determined to finish the fight no matter what. Ouroboros didn't believe him and declared he would never let them win. With his last reserves of strength, Ouroboros charged at Al, ready for a final attack. But Al met him head-on with a powerful uppercut. The blow landed, and the black dragon was finally defeated. Breathing heavily, Helen asked if Al was alright. He assured her he was fine, but something about Helen's behavior suddenly felt off. Without warning, she plunged a knife into Al's stomach. Shocked, he couldn't understand why she had betrayed him. But Helen's smile twisted with wickedness. Al tried to drink a healing potion, but it slipped from his fingers and spilled on the ground. Helen launched a new assault, leaving Al bewildered. "Why are you trying to kill me?" he asked, desperate for an answer. She ignored his question, striking again, but this time Al was protected. Ouroboros, who had possessed Helen's body, was taken aback because a powerful dragon named Mirage had been resurrected to fight back. At that moment, Al realized this was no ordinary dragon. It was a blue-eyes white dragon, not a gentle one. Mirage explained to Al that Ouroboros had taken control of Helen, but refused to let the enemy triumph. The dragon bestowed Al with his power, boosting him beyond his limits, but this gift drained Mirage's own life force. Meanwhile, Fel evacuated her kingdom, ready to defend her land if Al failed to stop Ouroboros. Mirage then revealed a painful truth to Al: to save Helen, he would have to fight her, beat her up, even. Ouroboros scoffed, convinced Al could never harm someone so dear to him. But Al didn't hesitate. He punched Helen hard in the stomach. Ouroboros was furious. After it all ended, he looked at her with guilt in his eyes. Yet Helen reassured him that she didn't mind the violence, as long as it meant he could take down Ouroboros. Moments later, Al believed things had returned to normal. But suddenly, Ouroboros exited Helen's body and phased like a ghost into Al's. Ouroboros mocked Mirage, fully convinced he had achieved victory. But then he paused, sensing something was off. He discovered that Al had the mind of a deranged farmer, someone who thought only about crops and livestock. It was that same obsessive passion for farming that gave Al the will to force Ouroboros out. At that point, Mirage rose and declared himself Ouroboros' new boss. With authority, Mirage activated a hidden ability and banished the little nuisance from existence. The world was saved, and Mirage thanked Al for his help. The clouds parted, letting sunshine bathe the land in light once more. Later that evening, Al awoke to find both of his girls safe and smiling. He was now officially part of the guild, and Fel gave him a heartfelt hug. He turned to Helen and told her they'd beaten the wicked dragon together. Mirage, however, had vanished, his strength drained after purging the evil. Helen was unharmed, and even better, she'd received a strange new ability. She now had dragon-based powers. Al and Fel were amazed when Helen demonstrated that she could partially shift into a dragon. After seeing her morph, Al wondered if she now had new pronouns or identified differently. Helen clarified that she was still a girl and said she was thankful that Al had saved her. She also wanted to know about Al's connection with Fel. Since Fel was still in disguise, she claimed they'd grown up together. Soon after, Helen's family and close friends arrived, relieved to see her alive and well. They offered their thanks to Al and praised him for taking down such a legendary threat. Then Wong suggested that Al should get some rest, but Al insisted he was okay. They started making plans to celebrate their win, and Fel proposed something special. She nearly slipped up and exposed her royal identity in the excitement. A few hours later, the guildmaster raised a toast in Al's honor. While sipping lemon juice, Al was nudged by Luke to drink something stronger. But Al refused. He was focused on harvesting his potatoes the next morning. Fel could read his thoughts clearly. She thanked him once more for rescuing her homeland. She also shared how anxious she'd been, though deep down she had never stopped believing in him. Later, we saw Helen entertaining her friends by showing off her new abilities. The next morning, Tester gave Al a hand with gathering vegetables. He asked if it wasn't exhausting for Al to maintain his crops while living in the royal capital village. Before Al could respond, Reeks appeared and handed over a letter. Apparently, Reeks was an expert at tailing people and always knew Royal's whereabouts. Al realized the letter was from his father. In the letter, Al's father wrote that he was in good health and happy that Al had relocated to the royal capital. He also invited Al to visit him. Tester chimed in, saying he'd tend to Al's crops during the trip. The following day, Al strolled past a produce stall. There, he came across a tomato that oddly tasted like a gourmet burger. Curious, he asked the vendor where it had come from. Getting excited, Al then began rambling about his own farming efforts. That's when he discovered the tomatoes were from Gotham City, prompting him to head to the guild. He shared the news with Helen, who was shocked at first. Then she learned he intended to visit his parents as well. But in truth, Ul's main reason was to get those tomatoes. Shortly after, he discovered that Helen had decided to take on the quest he'd accepted. She revealed she'd ranked up to F-rank adventurer after unlocking dragon-related powers. After leaving the guild, his generous benefactor, Fel, appeared. She assumed he was off on a journey. When she found out he was visiting his parents, she insisted on going too. Ul knew how persistent Fel could be, so he bolted out of town. While traveling through the woods, he sensed danger, and that's when an orc emerged. Ul was caught off guard and realized it was none other than Shrek's eccentric uncle. Unfortunately, Shrek's uncle was into men and had some disturbing intentions for Ul. Ul refused to drop the soap, but the moment was already getting out of hand. Just in time, a blue-haired girl arrived and defeated the orc. Even though he was saved, Ul took some serious emotional damage. Seeing this, the girl offered him a strange purple drink to calm him down. Ul explained that he was an adventurer, and for some odd reason, orcs always seemed to come onto him. The girl then introduced herself, saying her name was Rory, and she was happy to meet him. When she heard Ul was headed to Gotham City, she asked to join. Since she was heading there too, Ul wondered if she'd be comfortable traveling with a guy. She cracked a joke, and that's when Ul saw a completely different side of Rory. Then he discovered she had no issues journeying with a guy because she believed no man would ever look at her that way. Ul casually told her she was cute, accidentally charming her in the process. After that, they made their way to Gotham City, and Rory seemed energized. That evening, Rory sensed a strange presence in the woods and assumed a creature was closing in. They both got ready to fight, but Ul realized it wasn't a monster. Reek showed up, holding a letter addressed to Ul. Ul was stunned that he had tracked him down in such a remote place. Still, Ul was irritated at his mother for sending him 3 or 4 letters a day. Ul then shared with Rory the real reason for visiting Gotham City. She found out about the famous tomatoes there, which apparently tasted like juicy smash burgers. Not long after, Ul asked about her family, and she became quiet. He could tell she had none. She then pulled a massive tent out of her item box. Ul was taken aback and learned that the box had been passed down through her bloodline. They made dinner together, and Ul was completely floored by her cooking. He couldn't stop praising her skills and asked what brought her to Gotham City. That's when he discovered that her goal was to grow stronger. She had also heard rumors of a demon named Joker appearing in the city. Rory wanted to look into it and make sure the people were safe. Out of nowhere, she confessed to Ul that she was a descendant of the legendary hero. Ul was stunned and felt uneasy after hearing she intended to take up that legacy. She was glad he cared and turned red from blushing. Then Rory mentioned it was time to rest. Ul figured he'd sleep out under the stars. But Rory pointed out that there was plenty of room in her tent. She also mentioned that she always wished she had someone to chat with before bed. Ul was ready to grant that wish, but Rory had already dozed off. Just as Ul was settling down to sleep too, Rory smacked him with a roundhouse kick in her sleep. By morning, they had reached Gotham City, and Ul was already beat up. He peeled off his bandage and mentioned to Rory that he was actually a farmer by trade. Soon after, they entered Gotham City, and Ul said his goodbye. Rory smiled, saying she had enjoyed their time together. Ul picked up on her feelings and told her he'd like to hire her as a guard for the return trip. That made her smile even more, and she gave him the address of the inn where she was staying. Later, Rory asked a local woman about the rumors of the demon. Unfortunately, the woman didn't know anything, and Rory came up empty. That was when she recalled being called worthless. Out of nowhere, a scream rang out and Rory rushed toward the sound. A panicked woman cried out that a creature had escaped into the forest and had taken her sister with it. Without hesitation, Rory darted into the woods, unaware she was being observed by a shadowy figure. Later that evening, Ul stood before his childhood home, and the moment his mother saw him, she burst outside, nearly causing mass destruction just to show her love. In the process, she accidentally broke Ul's back, making him think his end had come. Ul always knew his mom was amazing. She could cook, was kind, and looked lovely, but she was so protective that she often put him in danger without meaning to. As she clung to her son, Ul's father showed up. Misunderstanding the scene, he assumed someone was trying to charm his wife and immediately struck Ul. Lushika, furious that her husband had harmed their son, quickly retaliated. Her husband was swiftly disciplined, and after realizing his mistake, he gave Ul a sincere apology. That night, Lushika made Ul his favorite dish. Meanwhile, Ul's dad was given a plate of burnt chicken, extra crispy, and banned from eating at the dinner table. Later, Lushika asked Ul about Rory, which delighted his father, thinking Ul had found himself a partner. But Lushika grew upset, not wanting Ul to take another woman, and began whacking her husband again. Ul, expecting this reaction, calmly explained that Rory was just his bodyguard. His father, relieved, thanked him for the clarification. Ul then mentioned he was searching for tomatoes that tasted like smashed burgers. His dad pointed him to a location on the map, but something about it felt off. That's when Ul realized the inn where Rory was supposed to be staying never existed. That night, Ul went to bed in his father's room since his own was being monopolized by his mom, acting strangely clingy. By morning, Ul had managed to secure his precious tomatoes. Just then, a man cried out about being attacked by a demon. He claimed the creature had run into the forest of illusions and had clashed with a girl with blue hair. Ul dashed into the woods, unaware the man behind him grinned slyly. The illusionist deactivated his spell. Ul had walked straight into his snare. Moments later, a woman's scream pierced the air as she was set upon by a monstrous worm. Al jumped in and fended off the beast. Strangely, something about the attack didn't feel quite real. As he pondered this, the woman flung herself into his arms, thanking him profusely. But then, she transformed into a horrific creature and tried to devour him. Luckily, Ruri stepped in just in time and eliminated the threat. Al discovered that Ruri had been fending off magical monsters in the woods the whole time. Just then, the man who had lured them into the trap finally revealed himself. Still, he questioned whether it wasn't odd that nobody in Gotham City seemed to know about a demon. That's when Ruri had a realization. This man was the demon who had deceived her all along. Shocked that she had fallen for his trick, she listened as he revealed his name, Loki, and that he intended to kill her. But Ruri needed answers. Why was Loki after Al as well? Loki claimed Al was the greatest danger because he had taken down Ouroboros and Romeo, the former top commander of the Demon King's army. Al assumed Loki had some connection to Romeo, and without hesitation, Ruri charged at him. Loki casually countered her strike and struck back using a move straight out of Bruce Lee's playbook. Al immediately stepped in to heal her injuries, and Loki looked at her with disdain. Then, Al launched into the fight, though his opponent clearly wasn't taking it seriously. Al couldn't land a single blow, and things only got worse when he was caught in an explosion. Ruri feared for his life, but he emerged alive, only to be outclassed again when he re-engaged. Loki soon dropped the act and called himself a former high school bully, mocking Al for being weak and unattractive. Despite that, he admitted he was mildly impressed. Al had managed to land a few scratches with just his fists. As Al focused on recovery, Loki warned he would now end things. But Al refused to back down. Determined to confront his tormentor like a hero in a fairy tale, he stood firm. That's when Loki revealed his true goal, to wipe out anyone who posed a danger to him. Al was stunned to learn that Helheim was next on Loki's hit list. Loki then summoned two grotesque worms, seemingly pulled from some cursed version of Bikini Bottom. These monsters had consumed far too many chum buckets and came out swinging. Al barely managed to shield Ruri, but his defense slipped, and he got crushed between the creatures. Right then, Ruri jumped in and protected Al's blind spot. This gave Al just enough time to strike back, managing to eliminate one of the worms. As Ruri stepped up and told Al to run, playing the self-sacrificing role, he refused to leave her behind. Just then, Al's energy surged beyond all expectations, his aura spiked infinitely, and he unleashed enough force to bring down the second worm. Meanwhile, Loki, clearly inspired by too many late-night Dragon Ball Super episodes, unleashed attacks that mimicked the God of Destruction's techniques. Al dodged just in time. Delighted by the challenge, Loki summoned more worms to join the fight. Al and Ruri found themselves at a serious disadvantage. Loki admitted that at first, he hadn't planned to kill them, he simply wanted to collect them like playthings. But his mood shifted. He activated his ultimate spell, channeling destruction itself. Ruri, paralyzed and filled with guilt for being unable to act, felt she had failed in her role as a hero. That's when a memory of her parents' voices returned to her. They told Ruri she didn't have to be a hero, but if she truly wished to be one, she should give it her all. Loki then launched his assault, casting his destructive sphere into the sky. Just then, Al broke free and eliminated the parasite using a strange white powder, the same stuff those Wall Street elites always seemed to use. Loki was stunned and questioned whether Al was some kind of Colombian farmer. Al charged at him, but Loki easily dodged. Al then declared that he would bring Loki down and protect Ruri no matter what. Watching Al stand his ground sparked a fire in Ruri. She realized she didn't need to chase anyone else's approval, and she wouldn't let go of her dream of being a hero. From that moment, she chose not to quit and to give everything to protect others. But Al was running out of strength. Just then, Ruri drove a sword into Loki. Though Loki laughed it off as ineffective, Ruri was fired up and determined to finish what she started. Her inner magic surged, and she suddenly accessed the divine energy of a benevolent deity. Loki, now alarmed, tried to flee, but Ruri refused to let him escape. She unleashed a burst of sacred magic that obliterated him completely. In the end, Ruri emerged victorious, and Al was deeply impressed. After the battle, Al collapsed into sleep from sheer fatigue. Ruri smiled, thankful she'd met him, and found herself falling for him a little. Later that night, Al stirred awake and was shocked to find himself resting on Ruri's lap. He quickly apologized in embarrassment, and she turned red. Soon after, Ruri admitted she had no clue how to return. Al brushed it off, and the two began walking back to Gotham City. As they journeyed, they heard a mysterious voice. Ruri froze, terrified it might be a ghost. Since spirits had no physical forms, they couldn't be fought off. The voice grew louder, and Ruri began to tear up. That's when Al figured it out. It was just his mom calling. Fearing for Ruri's safety, he decided to flee before his mom could do anything extreme. Ruri burst out laughing, thinking Al was also scared of ghosts. A few hours later, they arrived in Gotham City, only to find their hotel had vanished. Al returned home, remembering how worried his mom would get when he stayed out too late. Back then, he'd come home to her furious scolding after playing past dark. This time, as he stepped through the door, he braced for another lecture, but his mom popped up behind him, and he bolted in panic. Wanting to avoid punishment, he left his dad behind. The next morning, Lushika begged him not to go. Al's father gently tried to reason with her, but she wouldn't budge. Al finally said if she stopped him from leaving, he wouldn't love her anymore. He didn't mean it, but it was the only way to get her to relent. With a heavy heart, she gave her blessing and told him not to push himself too hard. At that moment, Al recalled the day he decided to become an honest farmer. Lushika felt proud of him and wished for his safe return. After that, Al said farewell to his father and began his journey back. Next, we see Ruri, who was already waiting for him. While traveling together, Ruri asked if he had any idea why Loki was after him. Al answered that he wasn't sure about Loki's reason for trying to kill him, but he appreciated Ruri stepping in to help. Hearing that, Ruri turned red, overwhelmed by Al's overwhelming aura, and they continued their journey. That evening, Fel reached a personal decision that greatly upset her father. He began crying and apologized for his failures as a parent. Days passed, and Ruri ran into Helen at the guild. Helen questioned her about her bond with Al, and Ruri told her they were just friends. Al didn't realize that both girls had developed feelings for him, and a rivalry quietly began between them. Later in the day, Al caught a kid trying to snatch some eggplants from his farm. The boy said sorry, and Helen gently scolded him, saying stealing was wrong. However, Al wasn't angry about the theft. He was upset because the eggplants hadn't fully ripened yet. When the boy's stomach rumbled, Al offered him a ripe cabbage instead. The boy gratefully accepted it, reminding Al of a time he once shared food with a girl. Helen then mentioned that monsters had been attacking merchants lately, which made it hard for the poor to afford food. Al felt concerned and wanted to help improve things. Suddenly, alarms rang out, and they rushed toward the city walls. Monsters had begun attacking the royal capital, and adventurers fought to hold them off. Soon, Al arrived and heard Lamia warn that the city could fall if more creatures showed up. The royal soldiers rallied, determined to defend their home. Unexpectedly, Helen transformed into her dragonoid form and joined the defense. She unleashed an explosive spell that took down a dragon. Then, a strange creature resembling a Team Rocket Pokemon showed up, but Ruri swiftly eliminated it. Al stepped in next, wielding his powerful farming gear to crush the enemy forces. Together they fought fiercely, even while multitasking with cooking. The battlefield filled with fallen monsters. But their numbers kept growing. Soon, they heard a roar from the west. It was a military unit from another nation. The king of Antisburg warned the monsters to back off or face destruction. To everyone's surprise, the monsters slowly retreated into the forest. Al was stunned. The Antisburg prince then proudly declared their triumph. Everyone believed that monsters were terrified of the legendary blade from Wakanda. That evening, Al was wiping down his farming tool when an unexpected knock came at his door. It was Fel. She came to bid farewell, revealing that she was leaving the kingdom for good. Al was taken aback, shocked by the fact that she had no plans to ever return. Just then, Maid Albi arrived to escort Fel, informing her that the carriage was ready to depart. Al stood there, puzzled. He couldn't understand why Fel would abandon her homeland. He wanted to ask, to talk it out, but she turned her back and walked away without a word. As she stepped into the carriage, she offered a final thank you and goodbye. Days rolled by, and Al felt relieved that monster raids had stopped. But his mind still lingered on Fel's sudden departure. Soon after, the young boy who had once stolen from him reappeared, this time with his mother, who apologized sincerely. The boy confessed how tasty Al's vegetables were, and Al discovered that the woman owned a fashion store in town. She proposed buying produce from him, and Al gladly shared a variety of his harvest. Not long after, Reek arrived, surprising Al. He handed him a letter from his mother and then showed him a troubling article in the daily paper. Meanwhile, Rui returned from her mission and quickly bonded with Helen. Over a shared lunch, they discovered the surprising news: Princess Fel was now engaged to Prince Nedalus. They were stunned that she was marrying the man associated with the sacred blade of Wakanda. Rui was skeptical about the prince, noting that monsters couldn't understand human language. Around this time, Al entered the scene looking for Philia, but instead, he gave the girls a letter from his mom. However, he accidentally handed them the wrong one, causing the girls to laugh and tease him. Through the real letter, they discovered that the sacred sword was actually a fake commission through Wish. Lushika had even met the swordsmith, who confessed the truth behind it. As the letter continued, it was revealed that Al's mother was once the leader of the Shadow Puppets, a covert group stronger than elite adventurers. The girls explained the Shadow Puppets' true power to Al. When Helen read the final part, it revealed Prince Nedalus was the mastermind behind the monster invasions. Shocked, Al declared that he would rescue Princess Fel. The girls were thrown off by his statement, and Al almost exposed Fel's true identity, forgetting her usual disguise. Suddenly, Reek jumped in, eager to join Al's rescue plan. Cut to the twisted Prince Nedalus. He was surrounded by kings thanking him. Unbeknownst to them, he had deceived every one of them. His plan was unfolding perfectly, and the other rulers were now depending on his aid. Like a mafia boss, he demanded tribute in exchange for protection. He had ambitions of taking over other lands and ordered Gazelle to send demons to spread chaos across borders. When Gazelle objected, Nedalus slapped him and claimed his dominance, saying he was the one in charge now. Nedalus had threatened Gazelle, warning that harm would come to his wife unless he continued to dispatch monsters to neighboring kingdoms. Just then, Fel entered the chamber, visibly furious after witnessing Nedalus strike one of the servants. Not long after, a knight arrived with news that the ceremonial carriage had been delayed. Fuming, Nedalus yelled at the knight, demanding he fix the issue immediately. Trying to regain control, he poured Fel some champagne and attempted to soothe her temper. Fel despised the unpleasant prince, finding him cruel and insufferable. During that time, Prince Nedalus expressed how eager he was about their upcoming marriage. The following day, Ul visited a shop and picked up some new off-white attire. Meanwhile, Reeks and the girls were already waiting for him. Reeks had planned everything and told Ul they could enter the kingdom using the carriage without any problems. However, Reeks revealed he wouldn't be going with them. His goal was to prove the sacred sword was a forgery and expose Nedalus by summoning monsters. In a surprising twist, he revealed that he was a demon, leaving the group stunned. He explained that not every demon was malicious, and the demon serving Nedalus was merely being coerced. Ul agreed to help rescue the blackmailed demon, and thus their mission began. That night, Fel gazed out her window, silently wishing she could see Ul again. By the next morning, Nedalus was ecstatic. Now that he had a bride, he could finally ascend as the ruler of Antisburg. As he approached Fel, dressed in her wedding gown, he praised her beauty and asked her to accompany him to the church. Fel declined, saying she needed a moment, her feelings about the wedding growing conflicted. Soon after, she asked Albi to give her space. Fel remembered her father's words, that she was free to choose any man regardless of status. Though she longed to marry Ul, she was prepared to give up her happiness for her homeland's safety. Meanwhile, Ul and his group had infiltrated Antisburg and slipped into Tilted Towers without trouble. Ul decided to put on his new outfit as a disguise. The girls were puzzled as to why they needed to pose as farmers. Then Ul laid out his plan. They'd rescue Gazelle's wife and expose the fraud behind the sacred sword. The girls were skeptical about the simplicity of the plan, and their concerns grew when a knight approached them suspiciously. Ul tried to bluff, pretending they were just farmers selling produce, using his skills as a merchant. But things went wrong, his excuse failed, and soon they were being pursued by a squad of knights. Ul couldn't understand how his flawless plan had gone so wrong. That's when Helen had a sudden idea. She launched Ul straight toward the palace. With a wish for luck, she threw him skyward. Moments later, a girl inside the palace stared in shock as her room was abruptly demolished. Ul groaned in pain, clutching his pounding head, and muttered an apology. He then turned to the woman nearby and asked if she was Gazelle's sweetheart. Just then, several guards stormed in, demanding to know who he was. With a cocky grin, Ul introduced himself as the farmer warrior and proceeded to pummel the guards, using only vegetables. They stood no chance. As he dusted himself off, Ul muttered something about the knights possibly swinging the other way. He then turned to Gazelle's girl, explaining he had come to rescue her and his beloved. He tried to make a quick getaway with her, but there was one major hiccup, a massive iron shackle chain to her leg. Unfazed, Ul hoisted her up and carried her off. While dodging the pursuing knights, they reunited with his companions. The group made their way to a church. Determined to rescue Princess Fowl, he left his girls behind with a nod of gratitude. As they wished him luck, the knights arrived again, prompting the two girls to stall the soldiers with a dramatic distraction. Meanwhile, King Magus asked Fowl if she was truly certain about marrying Nedalus. She solemnly replied that it was a choice made for the sake of the kingdom. Magus felt ashamed, knowing that without Nedalus' help, he couldn't hold back the monsters. The priest began the ceremony, and when asked, Fowl accepted. Just before the kiss, Nedalus vowed to make her happy. But deep down, Fowl longed for Ul. She didn't want to wed a smug prince. Just then, a loud crash echoed, the door slammed into Nedalus. Fowl looked around in disbelief. Ul entered with Farmer Rees, exuding an aura of plus 30,000. Fowl, overwhelmed with emotion, burst into tears at the sight of her favorite farmer-turned-hero. Nedalus, humiliated, accused Ul of being the real villain. Ul fired back, claiming Nedalus' legendary sword was nothing but a counterfeit from Wish. Nedalus scoffed, swearing it was 100% made in Switzerland. King Magus argued he'd seen the prince use the blade to scare off monsters. Nedalus then challenged Ul to prove it. Just then, a knight rushed in, warning of a huge monster horde heading for the capital, lured there by Rix using a magical artifact. Panic spread, and all eyes turned to Nedalus. They urged him to act. He summoned Gazelle, only to realize he was now distracted, happily reunited with his lover. Then Rix handed Nedalus the so-called Sacred Sword of Wakanda. Nedalus panicked. He knew he lacked Wakanda's strength and wasn't chosen to be the Black Panther. As the beasts neared the church, confusion spread. Ul flung the fake sword at the monsters, and the royal families began to see the truth. Nedalus was a fraud. Suddenly, Gazelle played his flute, commanding the monsters to disperse. He exposed Nedalus' lies in front of everyone. When King Magus asked for an explanation, Nedalus simply broke into maniacal laughter. However, he informed them that he had unleashed a horde of monsters upon Magus the night before. This revelation stunned everyone, and Gazelle accused him of lying, saying such an attack couldn't happen without the enchanted flute. Prince Nedalus replied smugly that he didn't need a flute. The monsters were lured in by the dead bodies he had planted in Magus. At that moment, Rory and Helen arrived, declaring that Magus wouldn't fall so easily. They explained that the soldiers and adventurers of Magus were fully prepared to defend their homeland. The battle against the monsters began, and the creatures were swiftly overwhelmed. Elsewhere, Ul told Fel there was no need for her to throw her life away. Moments later, the Knights of Antisburg showed up, intent on detaining Nedalus after discovering he was responsible for the destruction of Tilted Towers. Feeling cornered, Nedalus made a desperate attempt to kill King Magus. but Al blocked the attack using vegetables and landed a punch on the prince's face. Medalus was then apprehended by his own knights and escorted away. Fel leapt into Al's embrace, stunning everyone around. She confessed her love, and Al stood stunned by her words. Rory, filled with envy, questioned Al about his bond with Princess Fel. Al assumed that Fel's father would object, but instead, he warmly welcomed Al into the family. Afterwards, Reek spoke with King Magus and handed him a message originally addressed to Medalus. Upon reading it, King Magus realized that Reeks was part of the shadow puppets and suggested that a hidden figure was pulling the strings. A few days passed, and Al stopped by the Adventurers Guild. The guild master handed him new mission postings, but Al grumbled that he disliked doing quests. He'd rather enjoy a peaceful life as a farmer. Not long after, Princess Fel arrived unexpectedly, shocking everyone. She rewarded the adventurers with a great treasure for their efforts in defending the land. Once she left, Helen nearly stumbled upon Fel's hidden truth. Later, Fel returned in disguise and playfully teased Al. She then boldly told Ruri that she would win Al's affection. A fiery confrontation began, but Al slipped away to tend to his crops. That afternoon, while he examined a tomato, Fel and Ruri appeared behind him. They demanded to know whom Al truly loved, but he dodged the question. Suddenly, they pressed him further, asking if there was another girl he had feelings for. He agreed, which took everyone by surprise. After that, he returned home with the vegetables and offered the meal in memory of his childhood friend, Ilvia. Then the scene shifts to 15 years earlier in the village of Sills, where Al's father was out gathering potatoes. Just as he was ready to take a break, he noticed that Al had already collected 10 times more than him. Al was clearly enjoying himself, though his mother was upset. She believed her husband had made their child work in the fields. Later on, Al handed out some of the potatoes to people nearby. Then we meet Ilvia, who was caught by some villagers trying to take vegetables. Al figured out that she likely lived by herself and was desperate for food. Some of the villagers assumed she resided up in the mountains. Ilvia managed to break free and flee. While escaping, she took off with the potatoes Al had just given away to others. Later that day, Ilvia ate one of the potatoes, and Al went looking for her with more food. She ran at first, frightened, but Al called out, asking her to pause. He reassured her he wasn't there to reclaim anything and just wanted her to try the soup he had made. Still wary, Ilvia watched as Al left the bowl on the ground so she could eat without being seen. The next day, Al returned to the mountain with a homemade egg dish topped with ketchup. Ilvia happily ate it right away. By the following visit, Al noticed that she no longer seemed scared of him. Ilvia looked joyful, and Al was glad she enjoyed the secret sauce he used on the sandwich. He told her he had helped his dad harvest the vegetables and was happy just to see her smile. Soon after, Ilvia finally learned Al's name, and just then, Al's stomach let out a loud growl. Ilvia, being sweet-natured, chose to share her sandwich with him. At that moment, a group of villagers appeared, planning to punish her. Al stepped forward and begged them to let Ilvia go, offering to make up for the stolen food in any way he could. He vowed to grow more vegetables, but the villagers were still unwilling to let her off. That's when Al's father arrived and asked for an explanation. When he learned of their intentions to sell Ilvia to a slave dealer, he stepped in and gave them some of their own supplies to settle the issue. Later, Al asked if it was okay that his father gave away the rice. Ilvia, touched by the help, thanked Al and returned the potato she had taken. Finally, Al's father suggested they might as well share the harvest, since the family wouldn't be able to finish all those potatoes on their own. Al understood what his father intended and turned to Ilvia, asking if she would like to stay with them. 2 years passed, and Ilvia was now seen as Al's little sister. One day, she wanted to have lunch with him, but he told her he still had to tend to other fields. Ilvia grew upset because she just wanted to spend time with Al. He suggested she play with the other village kids, but she refused. Just then, Testa came running with a swarm of angry bees chasing after him. Testa panicked. That's when Lushika appeared and took down the bees with swift martial arts moves. With the threat gone, Testa was safe, but Al's father grew irritated when Testa started showering Lushika with compliments. Soon after, Lushika asked Al to look after their house since they were heading to the royal capital to search for a larger home. Ilvia, overhearing this, felt a pang of guilt, sensing it was her fault. Later, Al asked Testa why wild creatures kept attacking him. Testa revealed a map and suggested they could use it to track down Gold Roger's legendary treasure, the One Piece. He asked Al to join him and mentioned he might find a gem to gift Ilvia. Ilvia also wanted to come along, but Al refused. He didn't want her in danger and told her to remain in the village. While walking through the woods, Al questioned why Ilvia never played with the village children. Testa explained they had been bullying her, which made her cling to Al. This helped Al realize why his parents were so eager to move to a larger home in the capital. The map eventually guided them to the mountains, where Testa accidentally triggered a secret passage by stepping on a rock. Inside the cave, they found ancient ruins and were stunned. Al then touched a glowing stone tablet. Suddenly, Al saw a shadowy creature trying to consume his mind. At the same time, the volcano near Sills village erupted. When Al came to, Ilvia was at his side, relieved after his long sleep. Al soon felt a sharp pain in his chest, and Testa arrived. He explained that after Al collapsed, the volcano erupted. Ash buried the village, and their farmland was ruined. They also discovered the bridge across the river had been destroyed. That meant no escape from the village, and no food supplies. Al stared in disbelief at the ruins of their home. Looking over the fields, he was devastated to see everything gone. The pain in his chest returned, and before he blacked out again, he asked Ilvia if she was hungry. That night, Ilvia snuck into the mayor's tent to steal food for him. But as she thought about how Al always protected her, she couldn't go through with it. She left the tent empty-handed. The next morning, Ilvia gave Al her share of food to help him recover. Al noticed the food was minimal. Ilvia didn't tell him it was her own portion, she just smiled and said supplies from the capital were on their way. Afterwards, she mentioned she had already eaten and said she couldn't wait to taste Al's homegrown veggies again soon. Over the following days, Ilvia continued handing her portions to Al, even though she herself was starving. Eventually, after enduring hunger for too long, her strength gave out and she collapsed. Meanwhile, Al woke up and heard the news from Testa. She told him what had happened to Ilvia, saying her condition was critical due to extreme malnourishment. That's when Al found out that Ilvia had been lying to him all along and that the village had no active food suppliers. He was heartbroken over her passing and couldn't hold back his tears. When his parents returned a few days later, Al blamed himself for everything. In the present time, he thought about how much he wished Ilvia could have tasted the tomatoes he now grew. Weeks later, Al accepted a quest and ended up battling a dragon. On his way home after the fight, he came across an unconscious girl in the woods. He feared monsters might show up, so he decided not to leave her behind. By morning, the girl, Linnea, regained consciousness, confused and unsure where she was. She suspected Al had kidnapped her and brought her to some shady party. Al explained the situation, saying he wasn't some creepy guy. He asked her why she'd collapsed near the main road. She answered that she was on her way to the Adventurers Guild to submit a request. Being a gentleman, Al offered to guide her there himself. Not long after, Rory, Al's love interest, came by for a visit and was stunned to find another girl in Al's house. Upon learning that Linnea had slept in his bed, Rory was emotionally devastated. Later in the day, Helen heard about it and went to Al for an explanation. He cleared things up, and Helen understood that he had just rescued Linnea from the forest. Linnea then opened up about something strange happening in her hometown. Out of the blue, she asked if Al was strong, and Al, wanting to help, agreed to assist her. Helen asked more questions about Linnea's village, and Al was stunned when she said she came from Salty Springs, the place known for its legendary asparagus. He remarked that the place was rumored to grow asparagus so good, even divine beings would eat it. Linnea was taken aback to learn that Al was a total veggie fanatic. He promised to help her, mainly because he dreamed of tasting the asparagus from Salty Springs. She thanked him for giving her clean clothes and began to wonder why he was being so generous. She thought he expected something in return, possibly her body. Al was horrified to hear that and asked why she'd think such a thing. She admitted her father had warned her that men were like starving wolves. Once that misunderstanding was handled, she gave Al a sincere thank you. Meanwhile, Rui saw Al holding Linnea's hand and was left heartbroken. Finally, Al booked a ride and set off on the journey to Salty Springs. The Uber driver chatted with Al about Salty Springs, bringing up how the place was dealing with a string of unusual issues. A few hours later, Al noticed a female orc chasing their carriage. The Uber driver brushed it off, claiming orcs weren't dangerous, but soon, more of them began to appear. Al passed out after being forced repeatedly by the orcs to retrieve dropped soap. When he came to, he apologized, but Linnea assumed he had faked fainting to rest his head on her lap. Al quickly explained he wasn't thinking anything indecent, and then noticed Linnea handing him a pendant. It turned out to be a Reese pendant, which boosted his charisma while keeping unattractive girls at bay. The Uber driver then told Al that Linnea had looked after him the entire time he was unconscious, calling her an amazing girl. Soon after, they arrived at the gates of Salty Springs. Linnea told the gatekeepers that Al was under her care, allowing him entry. Still, he was puzzled about why the guards used mobs as weapons. As he wandered through the town, Al saw a vendor selling asparagus skewers. Curious, he approached and asked the man if anything strange had occurred recently. The vendor said things were normal and handed Al a skewer, completely burnt. Shocked, Al turned to Linnea and asked if this was how food was usually served here. Just then, a vegetable delivery guy crashed his cart, and Al rushed over to check on him. He asked if the man was alright, but the guy rose like a zombie. When the man stepped on a potato, Al grew suspicious but decided not to intervene. Out of nowhere, two strangers appeared and abducted Al. It turned out they had mistaken him for a piece of their luggage. That night, Al found out that Linnea's family owned a pendant store. She showed him a Cuban chain said to carry blessings from a benevolent deity. Linnea also suspected the enchanted stones were shielding her from becoming a zombie, unlike other locals. When Al asked about her parents, she said they vanished once the townsfolk started acting odd. The next morning, street vendors were seen behaving strangely after consuming too many moon rocks. Lemuru then made an appearance, introducing himself to Al. Al discovered Lemuru was the ruler of Salty Springs. Al respected him, especially upon learning he created their famous asparagus fangus. Lemuru invited Al to his mansion, and Al was thankful, even though he was again mistaken for someone's baggage. Later, Linnea mentioned she found Lemuru's invitation a bit shady. Al replied that they'd find out more during the dinner. That night, Sebastian gave them a tour of the mansion. Al believed Lemuru was a good man, particularly because of his devotion to asparagus. During dinner, Lemuru welcomed his guests warmly, prompting Al to question him about the odd behavior in Salty Springs. Suddenly, Lemuru's guards turned their weapons toward Al. Lemuru smiled calmly as Al began taking down the soldiers one by one. He overpowered them easily and turned his attention to Lemuru. But just as he was about to strike, Linnea stepped between them to shield Lemuru. Al was taken aback, and Lemuru praised Linnea for her actions. In that tense moment, the demon Vritra suddenly appeared, declaring his intention to enslave Al. Vritra believed himself to be the supreme Kai and had dreams of global domination. He revealed that he possessed a dark dragon ball that had been causing chaos among the townsfolk. Vritra mentioned he'd heard tales of Al's victory over Romeo, and that made him eager to claim Al as a servant to earn respect from other demons. Linnea then apologized to Al, explaining that she had led him to the city against her will because her parents had been kidnapped. Al didn't blame her. During their journey to Salty Springs, he had seen her kind and genuine nature. Vritra prepared to use the dark dragon ball to bind Al to his will. But Linnea, recalling the good moments she'd shared with Al, had a change of heart and begged him to escape. At that critical point, Al used a mysterious stone he had discovered in the forest earlier. It triggered a powerful blast, shaking the entire area. Al mocked Vritra, declaring that he wasn't a true top Kai, just a low-level pretender. He also revealed that his friends had already destroyed the origin of the dark dragon ball's power. Then it was disclosed that Al hadn't been mistaken for luggage, it was actually his two companions who had spirited him away. They had figured out the power source was inside a statue and formed a strategy to defeat the demon. Al then demanded that Vritra surrender, revealing that Linnea's parents were already rescued by his team. Vritra scoffed at him and tried to seize Lemuru. But Al couldn't tolerate a demon targeting someone who was considered an asparagus prodigy. In a sudden twist, Al pulled out fresh asparagus he had brought from Salty Springs and fed it to Lemuru. He claimed that amazing vegetables could work wonders. Miraculously, Lemuru regained his senses and began sobbing in relief. With Lemuru safe, Al launched a final attack and sent Vritra flying out of the mansion like a defeated cartoon villain. The following morning, Linnea thanked Al for saving her. She kissed his cheek, and his other companions were visibly jealous. Al turned red, and Linnea promised to visit occasionally to savor more of his secret veggie sauce. Weeks passed, and Al was back to harvesting his tomatoes, peacefully admiring his growing crops. Rui often joined Al in the fields to help, and the other girls supported him too, all sharing the same dream of becoming his brides. One day, Fel noticed the other two girls wore identical pendants. Helen and Rui explained that Al had gifted them the pendants. When Fel learned about Linnea as well, she got upset, calling Al a flirt. Despite her frustration, Fel was mostly concerned he'd soon attract yet another girl, and the others tried to comfort her. Suddenly, Al let out a high-pitched shriek that made him sound like a terrified child. The girls rushed over, assuming some kind of monster had ambushed him. But in truth, Al was horrified because a sneaky bush beast was draining the nutrients from his precious crops. Apparently, Al was so mad he basically turned into a fire-breathing tyrant like someone from a fantasy cartoon. Later that day, Al and the girls set up their produce stand in the royal city. A noblewoman came looking for tomatoes, and Al kindly tossed in a bunch of asparagus as a bonus. Not long after, his old adventurer buddy Jake popped by, eager for some of Al's freshly picked vegetables. Al handed over a nice cabbage, and Jake offered to treat him to drinks with his crew. Sadly, Al was swamped with work and had to decline the invite with a smile. That's when King Magus strolled in, interested in buying radishes. He also brought up Al's future with the royal household. Al didn't seem too eager, but the king tempted him with more farmland, which got Al thinking. Meanwhile, Rui tried to stop something and accidentally chucked a potato at Al's face. While dazed, Al had a dream where an angel tried to tell him something vital about his fate. He reached out, pleading with her not to go. Snapping back to reality, Al was startled to find King Magus standing right in front of him. A few hours passed, and Al thanked the girls for helping him with sales. He planned to use the money to buy Pest Killer and began cackling like a comic book villain. He was dead set on eradicating his leafy foe, and the girls wished him luck. On the way home, Reeks was handing out letters when he spotted Al acting suspiciously villainous. Reeks got a quick rundown of the bush attack incident and decided not to dig deeper. Then, they stumbled upon a girl being harassed by some sketchy characters. Al stepped in and told the creeps to back off and quit trying to rope her into some weird party. The gang didn't take it well and tried to jump Al, but he flipped the situation like a trap card, and the whole crew ended up running away, their leader flailing like a soggy cookie. Al checked on the girl and realized she wasn't human, she was a demon. Reeks recognized her and revealed they were of the same demonic lineage. Al found out her name was Yuria, daughter of the demon lord. She saw Al's kind heart and asked him for a favor. She wanted him to save the demon race, and Al asked for more context. She explained that her guardian, Volpidoma, had rushed into her room, saying the place was no longer safe, and walked her to a distant land. Reeks mentioned it would take 3 days to reach the demon realm. Still, Al agreed to help. Then he asked Reeks to handle his vegetable pest issues. Soon after, Al went full ninja mode and ran across a lake like it was solid ground. Yuria panicked since she couldn't swim, but Al told her to relax. After a couple of hours, they arrived in demon territory. Yuria thanked Al warmly, and when he saw her smile, he felt glad he came along. She reminded him of his old childhood friend, Ilvia. Soon after, Volpidoma showed up, and Yuria smiled upon seeing him. But Al noticed something was off and quickly told Yuria to move behind him. Without warning, Volpidoma unleashed a destruction-based dot spell, prompting Al to grab Yuria and dodge out of harm's way. Yuria couldn't understand what was happening as Volpidoma struck again. He was relentless, forcing Al to divert the attacks toward himself. When Volpidoma aimed at Yuria, Al stepped in front to shield her from harm. It became clear to Al that someone powerful was manipulating Yuria's caretaker. Deciding to subdue him, Al launched a counterattack, though his first attempt didn't land. Refusing to back down, he eventually managed to land a kick to Volpidoma's face. As Volpidoma collapsed, Yuria wondered aloud why he would try to hurt them. Before she could gather her thoughts, Volpidoma rose again, preparing to cast an immense spell. At that moment, Al's mother appeared and quickly subdued him. Lushika told Al that Reeks had mentioned his side mission. Yuria, feeling timid, tucked herself behind Al. It was then revealed that Yuria's babysitter ranked among the top magic users serving the demons. Despite this, he usually stayed close to her, almost like an older sibling. The group soon arrived at the Demon King's fortress, and Yuria was alarmed by the sight. Numerous soldiers were wounded and scattered across the ground. Lushika speculated there had been internal conflict. Yuria ran straight into the palace in search of her father. What she found was heartbreaking. Her father was badly hurt and lying motionless. Al stayed by her side and believed the Demon King was still breathing. He then noticed a nearby soldier starting to wake up. But just then, Lushika attempted to attack the Demon King's daughter. Al blocked her, realizing she wasn't truly his mother. Al confessed that he had known all along. He explained that whenever he met his real mother, he always ended up getting hurt. Yuria was baffled, while Lushika was impressed by his perception. The woman suddenly called Al Oni-chan and changed shape, revealing her actual identity. A wave of energy followed, and Al's eyes widened when he saw Ilvia. It was someone he thought had died. Al couldn't wrap his head around how Ilvia was still breathing, but she spun around and joked about wearing her favorite outfit. He remembered her dying of starvation. Then she declared that she survived due to the evil god and now wanted to annihilate the world. Demonstrating her command of the destruction god's power, she formed a sphere of ruin and hurled it at Yuria. Al acted instantly to protect her. Still, the resulting blast was so strong it nearly demolished the entire castle. Staggered by the force the evil god had bestowed upon her, Al barely stood his ground. Ilvia praised him for evading her attack, despite the power of the dark god inside him still being sealed. Al stood stunned, and she asked if he had ever questioned why his stats were so absurdly high. She told him that his rare ability was tied to the evil god. Al mentioned he had no memory of ever meeting such a being. Ilvia responded that he had, back when he was a child, and she had always intended to steer him toward darkness, like Luke Skywalker's story. But Yuria snapped Al out of it, and this enraged Ilvia. Furious, she started strangling Yuria, furious that she called Al Oni-chan, and intended to end her life. Al tried to intervene, but Ilvia cast a binding spell on him. Realizing how truly dangerous Ilvia was, Yuria urged Al to escape. As Ilvia raised her hand to finish Yuria off, Al tried to interfere. Just then, his pendant activated and everything around him froze. He was baffled, noticing that time itself had halted. At that moment, a radiant goddess appeared before him, introducing herself. She explained that his pendants allowed her to reach out to him. She then told Al that she would purge the influence of the evil god from his body and share her divine power with him. Though Al didn't understand, the evil god attempted to stop it. But the goddess promised to pass on a portion of her strength. Al suddenly felt a surge of new energy within him. It was as if he had unlocked Ultra Instinct. The goddess wished him well before time resumed. Ilvia instantly sensed that Al now bore divine energy. Al thought he was cooking something, but all he saw were a few sprouting plants on the ground. Ilvia went to strike, but the plants unexpectedly blocked her, sparing Yuria's life thanks to Al's efforts. Even so, Ilvia effortlessly broke free again and ridiculed Al's powers. She then unsheathed a sword and launched a fierce assault at him. Al quickly summoned a wall of thorny bush gillas to defend himself. Ilvia was restrained once more, this time unable to break loose. Just then, Volpidoma appeared, unleashing a violet Kamehameha-like blast. He then approached Yuria, relieved she wasn't harmed. Everyone assumed Ilvia had been defeated, but Volpidoma's blast hadn't harmed her at all. She retaliated with a swift strike, catching Volpidoma off guard. Her speed surpassed even a speed star, and she was ready to end him until Al pleaded with her to stop. Strangely, she obeyed. After a short silence, she said this place no longer interested her and vanished. Moments later, Volpidoma questioned her words. He began to suspect Al might be aligned with evil, but Yuria clarified that Al had risked himself to protect her. Meanwhile, the Demon King regained his strength and halted Volpidoma. Afterward, he too grew curious and demanded an explanation from Al. Al clarified that Ilvia was actually his younger sister, settling the confusion. The Demon King then expressed his intent to assist Al in the future if any leads on the evil god emerged. Yuria, saddened by Al's impending departure, hugged him emotionally, but Volpidoma, annoyed, quickly yanked her away from Al. Al, trying to keep things light, joked that he wasn't into kids. In the days that followed, we saw Albi being summoned to Fal's chamber. She had already guessed that Fal was plotting another sneaky outing. Fal admitted she often made Albi act as her decoy while she went off to spend time with her favorite farmer, Al. As Val exited, Albie smirked with mischievous intent. Meanwhile, Al returned to his hometown, lost in thought. He recalled something his dear sister had once said, that he had already encountered the evil god. It reminded him of a strange dream he had back when he and Testa discovered a mysterious ruin. He later visited Testa and shared his recent experiences. Al brought up the day they had gone treasure hunting, but Testa couldn't recall anything useful and casually shifted topics. He started talking about how delicious Gotham City tomatoes were. Before leaving, Al invited Testa to come visit him in the royal capital, though Testa declined, saying his work as a fisherman kept him busy. Al journeyed back to the capital anyway, though he still loathed passing through the forest. There, a female orc suddenly appeared and chased him down. Not wanting any trouble, Al struck her hard in the stomach. To his surprise, the attack did nothing, and he took off running. Luckily, Jake, Lamia, and Luke arrived just in time to rescue him. Lamia noted that Al's strength seemed to have dropped, and even Al was taken aback. He later explained the incident to Helen and Rory, who also thought it odd that he couldn't beat an orc. Helen requested to check his stats, and it turned out that his numbers had indeed declined. Al guessed that it might be linked to losing the unique skill granted by the evil god. Helen then asked if he had any idea why his stats had dropped. Wanting to keep them from worrying, he decided not to tell them the full truth. Helen tried to reassure him, saying his stats were still above average for adventurers. Just then, Reeks came in with a message for Al. It was a heartfelt letter from Lushika. Before reading it aloud, Lushika teased Helen and Rory, suspecting they had tried to peek at its contents. Then Al read on, and in the letter, Lushika told him he didn't always need to carry burdens alone and could lean on her whenever needed. She ended it with a declaration of love. Not long after, Fel appeared at the guild, happy to see Al again. She hoped to spend some time with him. But Rui and Helen had the same plan. A clash began between the three as they competed for Al's attention. Amid all the chaos, Al finally started to enjoy the time spent with his companions. Though Ilvia and the evil god remained a mystery, he knew he had to keep pushing forward as a farmer, for his friends and for his homeland.